It was really good. It was a really good relationship I had with the Swami, but I was overwhelmed by the tremendous energy of being that close to him. It spurred it spurred my consciousness very fast. Even my dreams at night would be so vivid of Krishna consciousness. I was often sleeping when the Swami was up because he was up late in the night working on his translations. That's possibly where a lot of the consciousness and dreams just flowed in because of that deep relationship. It also had to do with studying Sanskrit. There's a lot of immediate impact with the language. The language seemed to have a strong mystical quality, the way he translated it word for word. Prabhupada's old friend from uptown, Robert Nelson, continued to visit him in Bowery. He was very impressed by Prabhupada's friendly relationship with David, who he saw was learning many things from the Swami. Mr. Robert bought a small American-made hand organ, similar to the Indian harmonium, and donated it to David for chanting with Prabhupada. At 7 in the morning, Mr. Robert would come by, and after Bhagavatam class, he would talk informally with Prabhupada, telling his ideas for making records and selling books. He wanted to continue helping the Swami. They would sit in chairs near the window, and Mr. Robert would listen while Prabhupada talked for hours about Krishna and Lord Chaitanya. Now people, oops, now people began coming to see Prabhupada on the Bowery. Carl Jurgens, a 30-year-old black man from the Bronx, had attended Cornell University and was now independently studying Indian religion and Zen Buddhism. He had experimented with drugs as psychedelic tools, and he had an interest in the music and poetry of India. He was influential among his friends and tried to interest them in meditation. He had even been dabbling in Sanskrit. Excuse me. Carl, I had just finished reading a book called The Wonder That Was India. I had gotten the definition of a sannyasi and a brahmacharya and so forth. There was a vivid description in that particular book of how you could see a sannyasi coming down the road with his saffron robe. It must have made more than just a superficial impression on me because it came to me this one chilly evening. I was going to visit Michael Grant, probably going to smoke some marijuana and sit around and play some music. And I was coming down Hester Street. If you make a left on Bowery, you can go up to Mike's place on Grand Street. But it's funny that I chose to go that way because the shorter way would have been to go down Grand Street. But if I had gone that way, I would probably have missed Swamiji. So I decided to go down Hester and then making a left. All of a sudden I saw in this dinghy above a brilliant saffron robe as I passed. I saw it was Swamiji knocking on the door, trying to gain entrance. There were two bums hunched up against the door. It was like a two-part door. One of them was sealed and the other was locked. The two bums were lying on either side of the Swamiji. One of the men had actually expired, which often happened, and you had to call the police or health department to get uh, you had to call the health department to get them. I don't think I saw the men lying in the doorway until I walked up to Swamiji and asked him, "Are you a sannyasi?" And he answered yes. We started this conversation about how he was starting a temple, and he mentioned Lord Chaitanya and the whole thing. He just came out of the flow of strange things to me, right there in the street, but I know what he was talking about somehow. But I knew what he was talking about somehow. I had the familiarity of having just read this book and delved into Indian religion, so I knew that this was a momentous occasion for me. I wanted to help him. We banged on the door and eventually we got into the loft. He invited me to come to a kirtana, and I came back later that night for my first kirtana. From that point on, it was a fairly regular thing, 3 times a week. At one point, Swamiji asked me to stay with him, and I stayed for about 2 weeks. It was perhaps because of Karl's interest in Sanskrit that Prabhupada began holding Sanskrit classes. Karl and David and a few others would spend hours learning Sanskrit on Prabhupada's guidance, using a chalkboard he found in the loft. Prabhupada taught the alphabet, and his students wrote their exercises in notebooks. Prabhupada would look over their shoulders to see if they were writing correctly, and would review their pronunciation. His students were learning not simply Sanskrit, but the instructions of Bhagavad Gita. Each day he would give them a verse to copy in the Sanskrit alphabet, Devanagari, transl- transliterate into the Roman alphabet, and then translate word for word into English. But their interest in Sanskrit waned, and Prabhupada gradually gave up the daily classes to spend time working on his own translations of Srimad Bhagavatam. His new friends may have regarded these lessons on Sanskrit classes, but eventually they were bhakti classes. He had not come to America as ambassador of Sanskrit. His guru Maharaj had ordered him to teach Krishna consciousness, but since he had found Karl and some of his friends a desire to investigate Sanskrit, he encouraged it. As a youth, Lord Chaitanya had also started a Sanskrit school with the purpose of teaching love of Krishna. He would teach in such a way that every word meant Krishna, and when his students objected, he closed the school. Similarly, when Prabhupada found that his students' interest in Sanskrit was transitory, and since he himself had no mission on behalf of Sanskrit linguistics, he gave it up. By the standard of classical Vedic scholars, it takes 10 years for a boy to master Sanskrit grammar, and if one does not start until his late 20s or 30s, it is usually too late. Certainly none of Swamiji's students were thinking of entering a 10-year concentration of Sanskrit grammar. And even if they were, they would not realize spiritual truth simply by becoming grammarians. Prabhupada thought it better to utilize his own Sanskrit scholarship in translating the verses of Srimad Bhagavatam into English, following the Sanskrit commentaries of the previous authorities. Otherwise, the secrets of Krishna consciousness would remain locked away in the Sanskrit. Teaching Carl Jurgen's Devanagari Sandhi verb conjugations and noun declinations was not going to give the people of America transcendental Vedic knowledge. Better that he utilize the proficiency in Sanskrit for translating many volumes of the Bhagavatam into English for millions of potential readers. Carol Becker came from an immigrant Catholic background, and she immediately associated with Catholicism, the Swamiji's presence as a spiritual authority, and his devotional practices of chanting on beads and reciting from Sanskrit scriptures. Sometimes she would accompany Prabhupada to nearby Chinatown, where he would purchase ingredients for his cooking. He would cook daily, and sometimes Carol and the others would come by to learn the secrets of cooking for Lord Krishna.